ton of money. We matched our matching gift, I believe. Wonderful, wonderful news. The downside is the microphone is missing, so we'll speak loudly. Paul assures me he has a loud voice, and that assures me that he will yell. So when you ask a question, yell back. Don't forget to sign up for the 6x3x1. The sign-up sheets are in the back on your right-hand side as you leave. And please join me as we welcome the F. Otto Haas, Executive Director of the Morris Arboretum, Paul Meyer, and Matt Rader, the President of the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, and the partner of our wonderful Minister of Music, Michael Smith. We are thrilled to have both of them here to talk about what we can do in our own backyard and neighborhood and around us and on this wonderful church grounds of 45 acres to care for creation. So please join me in welcoming Paul and Matt.
Thank you, Merrick. I think you'll find that there are certain echoes of what we have to say from what you said earlier this morning. And I'm just delighted to be here at St. Thomas's, where you are already doing so much. Your grounds are beautiful. I know you have a lot of folks here that work to tend the trees and to plant new trees, but also to engage children. And these are just a few of the things that I'm going to talk about briefly this morning. I think many of you, I see many friends of the Morris Arboretum in this audience, and you know the Arboretum was founded by John and Lydia Morris. And one of the quotes in their will is that, "May we have been worthy stewards is our hope." And I think this is something that we should all look back on our lives and say, may we have been worthy stewards. And you can interpret that in many different ways, but certainly we are all stewards of the earth. Now, we know about global warming, we know what we're facing, but I find this graph, and you don't worry about the numbers, it's really the trend that you have to look here. The important thing is this data, it was accumulated in Massachusetts, but it's the longest string of data anywhere in North America, dating back to 1820 and coming right up, extrapolating into 2020. So it's about 200 years of data. Now, the black lines where you see that up and down, that's weather. These are mean temperatures for each year, and mean maximums and mean minimums. And you know that it goes up and down, and we experience this, that some winters we have particularly cold winters, some winters are particularly mild, but what we're concerned about is the raising of the mean. So the black line goes up and down, the blue line is a 10-year mean, and that waves a little bit, but you see the trend is certainly upward. The red line is a 30-year mean, which takes away all the up and down noise. And you can see how that has been a steady incline over the last 200 years. So, global warming, this is data. There's no interpretation here. It's raw data, and global warming is real. So, the question is, what can we do about it? And there's so many things we can do. But this morning, I just want to, in a course of about 10 minutes, I want to introduce you to 6 small steps that can help us locally. First of all, introduce our children to the natural world. Plant a tree. Preserve and steward open space. Preserve our sense of place. Support your local farmers, or be one. And lead, L-E-E-D, leadership in environmental and energy design, lead by example. So first of all, introduce your kids to the natural world. I read in the church paper this morning that there's a scavenger hunt taking place this morning, where the kids are going out looking for things out in the natural world. There's so much we can do. And when I say introduce children to the natural world, I mean certainly we need to teach them science, but particularly for young kids, open their eyes. Focus on teaching them how to see. If a kid learns to see, then that will introduce them to a lifelong time of show them an insect, show them a fungus, whatever, but just help them see the beauty of the natural world that's around them. If we all learn to see, and very often, I lead tours of the Arboretum all the time, and I'll see something, and I'll take people up and introduce them to that, and say, these are adults. And these are adults who are connected with the natural world, but they say, oh, I never saw that before. Thank you so much for introducing me to the beauty of that flower, or that mushroom, or that bark, or whatever. Plant a tree. There's a tree planting taking place, or a tree dedication taking place here today. So congratulations on that. There is a wonderful Jewish saying. Now, at the Arboretum, each year we celebrate Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is the Jewish New Year of trees. You might think of it as the Jewish Arbor Day. And as we were celebrating this many years ago, we had a visitor come that was helping, and he shared this quote with me, and I've tried to remember. If holding a sapling in your hand, and you are told that the Messiah is about to arrive, first plant the sapling, and then go out and greet the Messiah. So, again, I think this echoes what Merrick was telling us earlier today, that, that there is spirituality to be found in stewarding the natural world. And that planting a tree is a very, very powerful metaphor, but more than just a metaphor, you're really doing something that makes a difference. Particularly if you plant a tree today that might be a white oak, for example, that could be there 300 years from now. And that tree is going to produce oxygen for all that time. It's going to absorb CO2 and pollutants. As it shades, it's going to cool. It's going to protect our watersheds and our water. It's going to provide wildlife habitat. And it contributes to our sense of place. I mean, think what this campus here at church would look like if you took away all the trees. It would have a very different sense of place. It may live for centuries, and of course it may also have other economic benefits. So whether you plant a tree in an arboretum, on a church ground, as a street tree, you might recognize this as right up the street in Flowertown. But one tree, just one mature tree, has the power to really change the whole sense of place. This is a churchyard not far from Rittenhouse Square in Center City. And that happens to be an American elm, which is surprising that it has even survived. Promote the preservation of open space. Now, many of your fellow parishioners here have been leaders for decades of the preservation of the Wissahickon, the preservation of other open spaces in Montgomery County or in Philadelphia. So many of you in this parish have certainly not only talked the talk, but you've walked the walk. And a big part of open space preservation today is the creating of trails, the Rail to Trails network. How many of you know this scene? Oh yeah, quite a few. Good, you're getting out and enjoying it. This is part of the trail that, and an old railroad bridge that connects Bethlehem Pike right up here in Flowertown with Fort Washington Park, and it's part of our extensive network of trails. But all this land that we preserve, all the trails, they need work. Volunteerism is a big part of that work, and I encourage you to volunteer your time, but also, again, most important, get your families involved and get the kids involved. Preserve our sense of place. Now, both the natural, and we talked about that with open space, but also the cultural. If we steward our cultural resources, our history, our historic buildings, it really helps to make our cities better places to live, our cities and our towns and our communities. And it takes the pressure of people moving out of the city into the countryside where they're consuming more open space. Now, the tendency in this country has been we trash a community, and then we move out to the next suburban ring where it's green, and then we destroy all the green that we moved there for, and then we move further out and out and out. And fortunately, that's beginning to reverse itself, and people are starting to move back into the cities. But if we're serious about protecting natural habitats, protecting open space, it's important that we make our communities, our towns, our cities green and desirable places to live. And to save our history too, because if we have a strong sense of history, a strong sense of commitment to the origins of our communities, we're more likely to preserve the sense of place as well as the natural resources of that area. Support your local farmers, or be one. Now, not all of us can have cows or pigs or goats or whatever, but almost everyone has a place to grow a few tomatoes or grow some lettuce. And you don't need a lot of space to grow some vegetables. Now, when you grow a vegetable garden, it repays you in many ways. It gets you in contact with the earth. It gets your hands into the earth. But also it rewards you with food. And even a small garden can give you a lot of produce. But it also is a wonderful way, again, of connecting kids with where food comes from. Now at the Arboretum, we like to share the message that man is completely and utterly dependent on plants for survival. I mean, think about that. The food we eat, the oxygen we breathe, everything, the fibers that we wear come either directly or indirectly from plants. And again, I find a lot of kids don't think about that, and a surprising number of adults haven't thought about that. So if we can get our kids, by using vegetables, by growing vegetables, to really appreciate that our food comes from plants. We have many farmers markets, many opportunities to buy fresh and local produce in this area, and I just encourage you, if what you can't grow yourself, support the local farmers market. Lead by example. That there's so many things that we can do to reduce our energy footprint. And at the Morris Arboretum, we opened a horticulture center 8 years ago now, and it's platinum LEED. It's the highest level of sustainability, and we're very proud of that. It has a green roof, it has cisterns, it has photovoltaic cells, and not everybody, if you're living in an older house, you can't necessarily do all those things, but there are smaller things that you can do to reduce energy. And LED light bulbs is one of the best things where you're greatly reducing your power usage, you're saving on your electric bill, and now LED lights, the price has gone down so much, but also sometimes people say, oh, I don't like the look of them, they're so blue, I hate that color. Well, that's the past. LED lights today you can buy in whatever color warmth you want. And with a minor investment in new lights, in some cases you may need new fixtures, you can really save. At the Arboretum, we switched all our lighting out over the past year, and the investment will pay itself back in 4 years. So, anyway, just wrapping this up and passing it on to Matt, I encourage you to think not only about these things, but other things you can do. The issues of global warming and environmental degradation are so great. And sometimes you just, when things are so daunting, you think, oh, there's nothing I can do. But this morning I just wanted to share with you 6 things, 6 small steps that everybody can take to help improve the situation. With that, welcome Matt, please.
So, it's going to sound a little We didn't talk in advance, but I think we share a lot of the same beliefs. So I'm Matt Rader. I'm president of the Pennsylvania Horticultural Society. Many of you are in some ways part of what we do, whether it's the flower show or supporting our community breeding work or volunteering time or even planting trees. So I just always start with a thank you, because PHS is fundamentally, it's a community of people. We don't have a specific place that's ours. We have many, but it's really about bringing together people from every walk of life in this region to aggregate their passion, their talent, their money, their desires, to make this region more beautiful, more sustainable, and a healthier plant community. Because as Paul pointed out, they're all fundamentally dependent on the health of plants. So, similar to Paul, this is just up the road, right? This is Plymouth Road in Germantown Pike. And for me, when I think about the world, we've actually created a really, really complicated world, right? On one hand, we've got enormously rich resources available to us, experiences we never could have imagined, housing quality, transportation choices, education, medical care, just phenomenal things in the world. And on the other hand, we've taken what was a garden when we started and created something pretty ugly and actually not particularly friendly to life in the long term. And that's an interesting paradox, right? And it can be pretty demoralizing. So at the same time as you've got a comfortable house and a beautiful garden and plenty to eat, there are people in Bangladesh figuring out how to farm on floating rafts because their communities are permanently flooded. At the same time as we're able to sit here and enjoy this beautiful landscape, we know that at least every year, maybe every 2 years, a storm is going to come that threatens the electric and transportation infrastructure in Lower Manhattan, which is the heart of the financial world. These are weird paradoxes, right? And this is really where we are. And honestly, I think it can become pretty overwhelming. So you say, okay, I know all that's happening. You survey Americans, as Yale did, and you find 52% believe that climate change really won't have a significant impact in their life, which also means that they probably don't believe it'll have a significant impact on their children's lives or others, which means that you kind of say, I know it's happening, but I can't do a lot about it, and I'm going to kind of assume that life will carry on. And that is completely human, right? It's a really big idea. It's really bad, and it's really scary, and it feels like, what can I do? So I wanted to suggest kind of 4 things in line with Paul 6 that I think you can do, that alone won't solve the whole issue, but I think will start to create impact and mindset shifts on every scale that will help us together address some of these issues. And the solutions may evolve over time as we evolve. And the very first step, which is not one of the 4, is just to see all of this as yours. So rather than thinking of your house and then you drive out on somebody else's street into somebody else's business and somebody else's arboretum, really look at the whole world as something that we co-own. You may be stewarding one piece yourself, your yard and garden and house, and somebody else may be stewarding another piece. But if we all shift to an ownership mindset and we all say, okay, every piece of this is ours, and therefore we are all in some ways responsible for putting all of the resources, time, and energy and creativity we have to work to making that every piece the best it can be, you really would see change, right? Rather than looking and saying, oh, that's super ugly. You think, well, that part of my garden, my world is not doing so well. What can I do to start to change that or make that a little bit better? So the first thing I say is just to see nature. See nature and see plants. So Michael is my partner, as you know. This is Michael in Quebec City. And it's an interesting view, right? It's basically an industrial view. But there's a whole lot of nature there. There's an amazing water system. There's amazing plant systems. There's cloud systems happening. And we can look at that and see, kind of high-rises and church steeples and a nice terrace. Where you can actually look and say, all that stuff is kind of accessory to this unbelievable natural system that's connected directly to the Atlantic Ocean, forest systems that connect with one another, climate systems that affect us all. And so just taking that moment, when you walk out the door, you'll see the parking lot and your car, but see this landscape, right? See the trees, see the grass, hear the birds. It's like put yourself in the mindset of the hymn writer who wrote How Great Thou Art, or All Things amazing thing. And anywhere, you can be in the most hard concrete environment. I think of Michael and I walking through kind of a rough neighborhood in Miami. And we're walking down this concrete sidewalk, and there's a gorgeous weed, right, in the crack of the sidewalk. And it's so powerful just to see nature, natural systems at play all over. So see nature, that is my first order. The second is in line with Paul's show Again Nature. I think it's show anybody nature, highlight a plant for nature. And I popped a picture of Jenny Roseneer, who's another familiar St. Thomas face. And this is a trip she and I took 2 years ago. And we're in a garden in England that I know really well. I lived there for a year in this garden. And Jenny showed me the plants. I'm not a horticulturist, right? So I know this landscape as an experience for me and a place of memories. But it suddenly becomes this like infinitely richer experience when somebody's like, okay, see this patch of grass? There's 4 things going on here. This forest is this, these plants thrive in America or don't thrive. This plant came from America, lives here, but no longer lives in Pennsylvania. Really interesting just to help somebody see nature. So once you've seen it, share it and get somebody else to see it. And I threw another picture here, which is a cutting show from the Valley Kenwood Garden Club. And it's another example of each of the people in this club clipped something from their garden, put it in a bottle, wrote notes, brought it in, and in turn, everyone else in that club has a chance to not just see a garden or see a perennial border, but actually see these, 8 plants. And that's really amazing. So taking that moment, first to see, second to share. And of course, the flower shows a good example of places where people share what they see to in turn inspire others. So the next one comes this core idea of what can you do? And it's very easy to think about, how you vote or where you give money or who you advocate for. And all of that is important. But there's a very simple gesture, which is to change what you do yourself in your garden, in your space, in your life. And I popped some pictures. So this is one of my favorite scenes in the world. This is a street in Bloomsbury in London. Big Victorian edifice, right? And yet, if you look, there's flower pots. There's a whole array. Some are, nice terracotta, and somebody really thought how to do it. The one up there looks like a houseplant that somebody thought needed a little breath of fresh air. But the reason I highlight this is they have changed the city, right? They took what was really concrete and brick walls. They have personalized it. They have changed the environment even a little tiny bit. This is no tree, but it's a little gesture. They've maybe inspired somebody else to see nature. Maybe they've inspired somebody else to grow a plant. And it's they open the window and put a pot out there, right? This is not radical, but it is incredibly changing. And it's a really powerful symbol to me of the power each of us has to make even the slightest change that has environmental benefits, but more importantly, in some ways can inspire others to think and see differently. This is a row house front yard in Toronto. Michael dragged me on a walk to go to the church where Healy Willen, who wrote the Mass that's sung in a lot of Episcopal churches, played the organ. And after church, we were walking to get breakfast, and we get this whole neighborhood where every front yard is garden. And it's not aesthetically beautiful. So the personal change here is, first of all, challenging your notion of beauty, right? It's not a nice lawn, it's not a beautiful little pot of petunias, it's not a rare perennial that you've hunted down on a trek. But it's a garden. And in this case, this would otherwise be a concrete parking pad. And instead you now have plants that are serving insects, you have habitat for wildlife, you have diversity of plants such that somebody who doesn't find grass interesting might see something interesting. You have a completely changed environment simply by challenging the notion of what a front yard should be, and then doing it. This is a view down that street. It actually is not all this shabby, but it's totally different, right? This is a yard in, we have plenty of streets like this in Glenside or Elkins Park or Ambler, and yet this is it's performing a completely different environmental purpose than nicely clipped yards. Vegetable garden, front yard, Paul talked about you don't need much space to grow. Again, I agree, grow some vegetables, and your front yard is just as good as anywhere else, and in fact, maybe even better, because you're going to inspire somebody else to think about the possibility of doing this. So your simple action starts to change the world and also starts to change mindsets. This is an example just around the corner from our house in Center City. I don't know who started it, but slowly you've got this block turning into kind of a massive container garden, and that's pretty inspiring. So it's that individual action. Everybody could have lived very nicely and kept their sidewalks left, and this block would have had a neutral to negative impact on the environment. But now you've got plants growing, and they also have planted trees, and you have a different sense of community, probably social cohesion, also better environmental performance, also serving insects, etc. The azalea garden, another example. So we've adopted organic land care standards for a lot of our public landscapes, PHS, the landscapes we maintain in Center City. So that's also something you can do, which is to say, I'm actually not going to use chemicals in the garden. It has serious implications for how you garden. It's a whole new thing to learn, but it really does help protect water and insects and other things. It's something that you can do. And then finally, preserving water. So we do a lot of work across the city in helping people to adapt their home landscapes to better manage stormwater. So in Philadelphia and in many suburban counties, when stormwater flows into the water system, it overflows capacity and raw sewage comes out the other end into waterways. So there are two ways to solve that. One is to build vast amounts of infrastructure and water treatment plants that use energy and chemicals to capture all that water and treat it. The other is to say, I'm going to create alternative infrastructure that just makes sure stormwater never goes into the system. So if the system is scaled to handle day-to-day sewage, it can survive, and stormwater will be handled in another way. So we do work across Philadelphia and now also in New Jersey and Montgomery County to create downspout planters. So the first rash of rainwater comes through the planter and gets absorbed into the earth. The picture on the left is just changing a concrete patio into one with permeable pavers. So the water that previously would have hit that patio rush into the drain, into the sewer system, in turn is able to soak through the pavers and eventually into the earth and be purified and managed in that way. So very simple gestures, all of which are accessible to you, and all of which actually don't require more money or time than what you're probably already doing today, but can really change the picture environmentally and also inspire others. And so that's what you can do on your own. The next step is what you can do in collaboration with others. And the beautiful part of collaboration is many individual actions can add up to something greater than the whole. And you can also put in what you have, right? So if you have time, put it in. If you have a desire to advocate, put it in. If you have money, put it in. You don't have to do it all yourself. You can kind of chip in the piece that works best for you, and the community will then carry it forward. And a lot of what we do as an organization is about aggregating what people have to offer and putting it together to accomplish something bigger. So just a few examples here. So trees, PHS does a lot of work, as does Morris Arboretum, to restore and care for the urban tree canopy. The tree canopy in this region is smaller than it should be, and it's also aging. This weekend alone, our tree tender groups planted more than 800 street trees in the city and Pennsylvania suburban counties. We'll do that again in the fall. You guys are planting trees. Morris Arboretum does a lot of work on the canopy. But again, this is a community. This is 5,000 people around the region who are trained to plant trees. Some contribute money, some contribute time, some knock on doors to get their neighbors to accept a tree. Ann Standish from Woodmere said, I want to be your talk tomorrow, but I'm planting tree tenders trees. That's a fun work. Community gardening, it's another thing people associated with PHS. We have about 200 gardens that we support each year. And again, this is a community effort. Some people are putting money in, some people are putting time in, the gardeners are putting a lot of work in. And together they build community, they grow fresh produce, and in 150 sites they now work together to grow food organically that they donate out. And so it's a community that anyone can be a part of. And in terms of local issues, community gardens in the city of Philadelphia are under incredible threat. They were often created on land that was abandoned by owners, and as the real estate markets, thanks to interest in urban centers, which Paul highlighted, have grown, these gardens are going to scrambling to try to preserve them and make sure that people in the city continue to have space as well. This is a garden I love. It's on a small street just off South Street in Center City, and it's a whole block long, and it has water features, and it's a perennial border and trees. And this one guy started it, others have joined him. But what otherwise would have been really a small strip of land between a parking garage and a sidewalk and a fairly bleak front for a row of houses is just a lush ornamental garden that's available to anybody in the neighborhood. So small community. And then this morning, if you caught CBS Sunday Morning before you drove to church, this was featured, which is a project in West Philadelphia where a community of people have come together to garden and praise. You guys have an amazing cemetery here. You got almost 100 people and their kids actively involved in gardening, creating beauty that in turn is enjoyed by the runners and dog walkers and family who use the cemetery, and also performing environmental called the Brave Brothers. So with that, I would agree with Paul that supporting any institution, Laura's, us, anybody who does something that you care about is important, and support is not just money. Support is time, advocacy, telling a friend, and even if that's not something you want to do, just doing something in your own environment to change how things perform is so valuable. And then you boil it all the way up just to say, all of this is ours. I see it, I love it, I tell somebody about it, and I do something about it. And that will make change. So I'll stop there. Thank you.
We have a little time for questions if those presentations were fabulous. And I'm sure this has sparked ideas for each of you about what we can do in our yard, our neighborhood, perhaps right here on our church campus. We have a wonderful landscape commission that does terrific work. We may want to one day think of creating a creation care task force. I believe they have one over in St. Martin's in the field, but something that helps us think about ecological action we can take. But questions for Paul and Matt? Don't be shy.
Yes.
I don't have a question. I'd like to add a comment. It doesn't take much time to Google the phone number of your senator or House of Representative person and express your point of view. And you can say, okay, it's only one person, it's one little tick on their chart of the yays and nays, but you got to start someplace with that. And I personally have a lot of disagreements with the current EPA. I don't know anybody else, but if you have feelings about it, it's another place to start to let your voice be heard.
Good point. Thank you. Other questions or comments?
Are you involved with local government that is pretty much just inundated with development pressure? Do you go to the meetings or zoning boards? Do you push back against people who say, hey, this is a piece of dirt, I'm going to slap up a high-rise, make a couple million, and fly off to another country?
Yeah. For many years, I was on the Springfield Township Planning Commission, but today I serve on the Montgomery County Open Space Board. And Montgomery County has had an amazing, over the last 25 years, they've had an amazing program of protecting open space and building trails and planting trees, all of that. So that's where I choose to put my time. And again, I think the point is that we can all be involved in different things, but if we act in a concerted manner, we can really affect change.
We do quite a lot of work in the city of Philadelphia to advocate for particularly community gardens and other green spaces to be protected, which has become a major issue as the city develops. We don't have a larger advocacy platform, although we're in the midst of big strategic planning, and it's something that we continue to think about whether we should play a role.
Junker?
What other areas in our country are models for this kind of thing that you look to for examples?
So, for Philadelphia is incredibly rich in breeding and horticulture specifically. Paul and I are part of a community of more than 35 public gardens and horticultural institutions in this region. So in terms of horticulture and gardening, Philadelphia in some ways is a significant leader. In terms of other institutions that I look to, there are no good analogs for PHS. Chicago has fabulous urban farming system and program developed. New York has really rich community gardening. There's great urban tree projects in Washington and other cities. So there's good examples around and about. From an open space preservation and public garden perspective, there are other good analogs that Paul knows better than I.
Yeah, well, I will say we have deemed Philadelphia as America's garden capital. We've got 30 gardens in 30 miles, so, we are the place. And it's incumbent upon all of us to make sure that all those wonderful public gardens continue to thrive. One thing that inspires me is the High Line in New York City. Again, the creativity of the folks who led that effort to look at it, what was an ugly, abandoned, elevated rail line, and to have the vision that this could be an elevated park. I would say, if you haven't been there, go there. But that concept is now inspiring other projects in other cities, including here in Philadelphia, where there's work underway to use part of the elevated Reading line that used to go to the Reading terminal and to turn that into an elevated park and connect it to other parts of the city.
So when I was a tree surgeon, I cut down all kinds of quaking aspens and ash trees, the fast-growing border trees. Is there a tree for like a modest backyard which is a best tree, and is there a worse tree? So if I wanted to plant a tree.
All right, that's a big question, and I'll give you a relatively short. One of the things I always say, I often talk about the importance of diversity in our plantings. And I start by saying there is no perfect tree, and that we have to hedge our bets and use many different kinds of trees. And depending on the situation, how big you want it to be, that the answer could be many, many different kinds of trees. But I recommend my book, Trees of Philadelphia. Get it plug there.
Do read the book. If it's street trees, we're happy to help. And I think Morris and Paul's book are a great resource. And Paul's book actually could make walking the streets of Philadelphia a joy, because you can discover some fantastic trees. It's really amazing.
The one thing I would say is that there's a certain tendency to plant fast-growing trees, because if they're fast-growing, they're going to be cheap. You might say, "Oh, I'm not getting any younger. I want to see this in my lifetime." But what I would say is that get pleasure. If you're 90 years old, go plant a white oak that's going to be there 300 years from now. As we look out across the canopy, particularly of northwestern Philadelphia, we do have a wonderful urban forest, but it is an aging urban forest. In some cases, it's a geriatric urban forest. And we need to replant, where appropriate, with large canopy trees. And by where appropriate, you've got to be mindful of the spaces involved, both the root space and the canopy space. But we need to be planting more big canopy trees.
How do flower gardens work into this?
How do flower gardens? Big part of it, right? So my Toronto example, the block garden in South Philadelphia, flowers play a huge role both in serving pollinators and insects and wildlife, but also inspiring people to do similar actions, right? And also getting people to see and engage with nature. So I'm a huge advocate of flower gardens of all variety and making sure that they're diverse in species and height and visual interest is really important. But they're an enormous part of fostering interest and play a very important environmental role. It's interesting, food gardening right now has more growth than flower gardening in terms of interest, but both have strong cactus and succulents, or really cacti and succulents, really neither flowering nor fruit, and houseplants in general. So interest across the board is good. They all play an important environmental role, and it's really which aspect makes you tick is where you should start.
How strongly do you advocate for native plants?
So I am not a horticulturist by background. PHS does not take a position on this. We believe native plants are valuable and important. There are also non-native plants that work very well in gardens, and we work hard to identify good performing woody and perennial garden plants through our gold medal program. So definitely a fan, not a dogmatic view. But I would defer to Paul.
And I would say much the same thing. It's very important we plant native plants. It's part of our sense of place. But I would say that doesn't necessarily preclude planting non-native plants. And particularly, we live in an age where our trees are being besieged by new insects, new pests, changing climate. And so, we need to overlay the importance of planting native plants with the importance of planting plants that are going to be well adapted to the current conditions. And when you plant a tree, not only the current conditions, but you're planting a tree that was likely to do well 50 or 100 years from now.
Yes.
You just touched on what I was going to ask about, which is the tree problems that seem to be attacking oaks and chestnuts and Dutch elms, and we have ash borers. Are you involved with the American Chestnut Project at all, either one of you? And is either one of you involved with any of the other problems that seem to be attacking trees in our environment?
We're not directly involved with the American Chestnut Foundation, which is busy breeding resistant chestnuts, but we're involved in an indirect way in that our collections are the source of genetic material that geneticists can draw upon in selecting trees that are resistant to these problems or selecting trees that might be used in hybridization programs.
Yeah.
We do have a chestnut that's about this big at the Arboretum, and it's sort of ironic saying this. We're in Chestnut Hill, and I challenge any of you to go to lead me to a chestnut in Chestnut Hill. There are a few, but certainly there are virtually no American chestnuts. Our young chestnut represents about a tree that has about close to 90% American genetic lineage and 10% Chinese lineage. So again, it's an example of the importance.
It's come from the back breeding program.
Yes,
of this
yes.
group. I think there's a group in New York that is doing gene splicing. Are you aware of that?
Yes, so they're doing genetic modification of
To
chestnut.
try to cure it.
And, I know that's a hot word, GMOs, oh my God, But, it's genetic modification is a tool. And, you could say, a hammer is a tool. I could hit you over the head and use that tool in a very bad way, or I could use it to pound the nail to build this building in a very good way. So, it's an example of the importance of having an understanding of the science of these issues before we rush to judgment.
One thing I'd add is our tree tender program, which is Philadelphia and Pennsylvania suburban counties, has a component that's a citizen science component that we've developed with the U.S. Forest Service, where tree tenders are actually monitoring a variety of conditions and feeding it back into an urban forest cloud system, so the Forest Service can observe, begin to gather data so they can observe trend. It's a relatively new program. You guys are probably involved too. And but a powerful idea of trying to use the kind of hive mind, to use the millennial word, to feed information together and be able to monitor tree conditions and address them proactively.
Mimi Kemmer had a question.
I have a question. I think this is certainly related to the concretization of our neighborhoods, but we have a huge problem with deer. And, I've added fences on top of fences to protect them, but they just go after everything. How do you recommend dealing with deer?
certainly protection of plants. I mean, some plantings have to be, you have to exclude deer. But also, Aldo Leopold, the great conservation writer, said that when man kills the last predator, then it's incumbent upon man to do the job that that predator used to do. And so certainly managing the deer population is one piece of that challenge. And that can be a real hot button issue, although I think it's calmed down in recent years. But I point out Bob because he was a real leader on this issue going back with 25 years when it was really a hot button issue. And every week in the Chestnut Hill Local there were banner headlines about what to do or not to do about deer.
Final questions, Jim?
Yes, I'd like to put a plug in for money, for funding. When I retired 6 years ago, I spent the first 2 years of my retirement volunteering for Tinicum Conservancy in Bucks County. And I'm not attempting to put a plug in for them, but they do some wonderful things in terms of helping to get owners of farms under agreement to preserve their land, et cetera, et cetera. But this all takes money, and conserving land takes money. And one way we can all do that is by joining as many, even for like $25 or $50, joining these conservancies to help support what they do, because they do wonderful things.
On that note, I'll just mention that you can also give major gifts to St. Thomas Church.
We'll all be standing at the door with our
It's helped put cobblestones in to prevent erosion in the cemetery. It's to beautify this campus. We now have a landscape memorial fund, but it all does take great amounts of funds. But we want this land to be as cared for as well as possible. We are called to be great stewards of it. We have our garden plots. We try to be very mindful of water runoff here. And I want to give a huge shout out to the Landscape Commission, Buildings and Hardscapes Commission, and the Cemetery Board. They have put in countless hours to looking into this and making changes here. And people long before us, including Tom Dolan, who I'll give a big shout out to, have spent years making sure that we have incredible trees planted on this campus. It's been pointed out to us that many areas such as the Grove are geriatric areas, and we have to replenish them with a new and younger amount of trees. For every tree taken down here now, we plant 2 in its place. So I thank these leaders. I thank Bob Wallace for his long-term commitment to conservation, the late Jim Stewart, the late Hank Webster, Gus Leininger, who just left, people who have been very dedicated to this. And if you have ideas for what we can do next year for Earth Day, I'd love to see us make available a whole selection of trees that people can purchase and plant in their backyard or in their neighborhood. We can't do enough here to address this issue, so we thank you for your creativity. John?
Along those lines, some people may remember this was before your time, we had an organized approach to this, a planned approach for planting trees, and they were planted as memorials. And we could do that again.
We do that now.
Extraordinarily.
We've planted quite a few. If you look at the outer perimeter of the new cemetery, kind of the ring road that goes around the new cemetery over here, there are many, many new trees there, all carefully protected against deer invasion. I leave here quite often late at night. It's not uncommon to see 10 deer on the property. But this is an arboretum of sorts, and we are so grateful for our strong connection with Morris Arboretum, where we have such crossover support for Pennsylvania Horticultural Society, for Matt, Paul, Jane Pepper, who's been very active here over the years. We are blessed. Thank you for what you do in every area, and let's really manage our little footprint of it to the best of our ability. Thank you for your time. Thank you, John.